أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم. قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى صدق الله العظيم.
تكبير تكبير تكبير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. What's to be said after the recitation of the Quran? Subhanallah, everything else just seems insignificant, to be honest with you. Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh Hassan. This brother, and as well as the people who recite the Quran, have really spoiled us by being so close to greatness of the Quran. And I don't know what else to say, subhanAllah, Jazakumullah khairan. One thing before we get in, just something I was thinking about when the brother had read parts of Surah Yasin and Surah Al-A'la. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to not be in sorrow. Don't be sad of what they're saying, to you, the onslaught that they're bringing to you. For Allah knows what they hide and what they do openly. Allah is fully aware. And one beautiful thing about this is sometimes when you're on the truth and when you're speaking the truth, someone outwardly may show some type of disdain or may attack you, but that's just sometimes a reaction because the truth they know very well, but it's so powerful they don't know how else to describe for whatever disdain or insecurity they have from the truth that's coming or guilt they may be feeling. But there's another thing that's really beautiful as far as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling, not just in Surah Yasin, but the very material that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us from. And it's something beautiful and it's miraculous. Adam alayhi salam, yes, was created from clay, right? And sulalatin min teen, actually, if you were to take clay and let it dry and then you hit it and it makes a ringing sound, that's actually what Adam alayhi salam was made from. But human beings after that were created, as we know biologically, from sperm and eggs, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights it so beautifully, with so much honor and izzah and dignity, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we created insan min nutfa, from a drop of sperm, and then he becomes rebellious towards us. And he has the audacity to know how insignificant that birth was from. And he has the audacity to rebel against Allah and to be very, very opposing towards Allah, right? And opposing towards the message in essence, because he's giving the message to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the people in the Quraysh and till the end of time, right? So there's something very, very much worth mentioning because it literally is the origin story of us. The creation of Adam alayhi salam, and then the origin story of every single one of us, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Insan, He also says, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. We created insan from a nutfa, from a drop of sperm. أَمْشَاجٍ, and then a mixture of a liquid. فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. And all of a sudden he can hear and he can see. It's not actually supposed to make sense. It only happens from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these verses are either two things for us. It's either if you're an arrogant person or you think you're greater or you think you're great, know what your origin story is, know where you came from. You're actually just an alleviation of somebody's shahwa, right? But the same verse is also a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, look, you are born from absolute nothingness, and look how amazing of a being you are. You're actually the most amazing of creation. As far as amongst Allah's creation, the human beings are the best of creation, right? So it's something really to think about, especially now since we're going to be discussing just questions and concerns regarding the world around us and our deen. As we gather for the second Saturday, inshallah, of the series which we're referring to as Ask Me About Anything. Ask Me About Anything is referring to us coming to a beautiful place, the house of Allah, a masjid, where we can discuss and ask about anything. Now, we shouldn't also be mistaken that the person you're asking doesn't have the answer to everything. But with the person whom you're asking, unfortunately, that's going to be me that you have to ask. Allah protect His ummah. If you're asking me, at least we're opening up a dialogue where the masjid, especially the youth, can discuss anything without anybody reprimanding them or thinking that their question is uncalled for, or they should have shame. They shouldn't ask a question, whatever that question may be. Whether the individual's contemplating about Allah or contemplating leaving the fold of Islam, guess what? They came to the right place to ask questions. If those individuals can't ask in this place, where are they going to ask? God forbid they have to ask atheists, right? I'm having this issue. My people aren't accepting me. What do you think about God? What if a Muslim individual had to ask that to an atheist? Where do you think? How do you think that's going to go, right? So the masjid is the place that we discuss these issues, and we don't shy away from these things, right? So if we start off small, there's one question that somebody had asked that said, why, and these are not, all of them can be different themes. They're not going to be all related, right? They can be complete. If I'm answering 10 questions, inshallah, they can be 10 different topics. The first question is, it's a good question. It's socially related to the masjid. Why are the men's and women's prayer halls unequal, right? So before we even get to that portion, what is meant by unequal, right? And I'm not saying what did the person intend specifically, but the word equality in the world that we live in now is very different and has many different connotations based on the definition of equality. And dare I say, there's a difference between equality and equity. Equality and equity. Equality means that everyone across the board, everyone deserves and has the same exact thing. Equity means, based on everybody of what they have, we're going to make them flourish accordingly, or give them the proper opportunities based on what they have. And dare I also say, Islam actually never claimed to believe in equality, right? It didn't actually say that everyone has to deserve everything exactly the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the most merciful, created every single one of us differently, and we all have different needs. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigned us certain rights over others, right? If I want equality, can I say in one household, the mother and the son have the exact same rights? Can I say that? I can say the mother and son have the same exact rights? Can I say father and son have the same exact rights? Can I say mother and father, even though they're both your parents, are they exactly the same? Are they equal? Yes, in the sight of Allah, equality is what? Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The ones who are the most beautified, sanctified to Allah, the ones who are the most honorable in the sight of Allah are the ones with the most taqwa. But in this world, we all have equity and Allah seeks justice, but especially in today's contemporary time, equality is actually non-existent in Islam. Islam is equal because, if you want to call it equal, but Allah gave everyone those specific rights and that balance, and Allah is the most just. Now, yes, should we treat people equally based on the time and place where you live? Of course, right? But something we should really, really consider and think about is the difference between equality and equity. Because just because you're treating everybody equal, it doesn't mean you're being just to everybody. There can be injustice, right? Now, you have this, mashallah, this brother here that's almost 7 feet tall, mashallah. And everyone, if they see him, they wouldn't know how nice he is, but he can be all of our bodyguards at the same time, mashallah. Now, if he's in the masjid, and my son's in the masjid, and he's the imam, and he is who he is, mashallah. And my son, let's say he's 8 years old, and he says, we believe in equality, I'm going to be leading today. Right? Now, is that justice or is that injustice? That's injustice. Number one, because this gentleman, mashallah, is reserved for that position. And we just take his positioning away from the community and we say, this little kid who hasn't even hit puberty yet is going to be leading. Right? And you have to be okay with it. Right? No, that's unequal. That just because we're claiming to be equal, we're actually committing a great injustice. You guys understand what I'm saying? So if and just look across the board, right? If your son comes to you in your house, whether he's 15, 20, 5 years old, and he demands the same rights you have as the father, and he's not going to be listening to anything you have to say, is that equality or is that injustice? Injustice for both. Injustice especially for the father, and injustice for the son because he doesn't know what he's getting himself into, right? So, those are just simple examples I gave. I know there's younger children here, something that they can understand. But Islam is about equity, not equality. But equality does have definitely a place in Islam, but it's not absolute. But Islam believes in justice, and we believe the roles that Allah had assigned us are complete justice. Why am I mentioning all this based on what somebody had asked about the musalla, the praying area for men and women, right? Now, should the prayer area for women and men be comfortable? Of course. Can we prevent men and women from coming to the masjid? No, we can't. From the hadith of Rasulullah, he said, don't prevent the women from coming to the masjid. Umar radiallahu an, he said, if it wasn't for this hadith, that's the only reason why I don't prevent any woman to come to the masjid, right? Look at Aisha radiallahu anha. After the passing of Rasulullah, now this is Aisha radiallahu anha, her saying this, from amongst the greatest jurists of the ummah. And I'm not saying this as something that's absolute, but just so you know that there's other areas in Islamic academics, especially by way of Sahaba, who had differences of opinion. Aisha radiallahu anha, based on when she grew older and she saw how men and women were coming to the masjid, right? She said if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was alive today, that hadith would probably not be applicable the way women are conducting themselves in the masjid. I'm not talking about this masjid. I'm not talking about any other masjid. I'm just telling you the opinion of Aisha radiallahu anha, right? Because of the conditions at the masjid and the sanctity that it held. Now someone could say, why are you mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because another person had asked me this and said that it's only men that make claims like this. How come there hasn't been any women that say this about the masjid? And I'm telling you that Aisha radiallahu anha, who is from amongst the greatest jurists, the people of fiqh from the Sahaba, also had their own take on this. But nonetheless, the masjid, you cannot prevent anybody from coming to the masjid. And if you're talking about equal in the question regarding size of the musalla for the men and the women, is number one, it's fard for the males to come to the masjid. You can't prevent women, but the hadith of Rasulullah is there's more ajr for women for praying in their homes than in the masjid. But you still, the hadith isn't indicating that you prevent women to come to the masjid. It just means that if women want more ajr when they pray salah, they should pray in their homes. But of course they should still come to the masjid, especially in the climate, political climate that we're living in, and people are in need of Islamic education, of course. But the size and the maybe even the resources are allotted, which seems to be on face value, which may seem greater for the men, and a greater crowd as far as men are concerned, is because it's fard for men to be in the masjid, so the space naturally will be bigger, right? And if we have any other questions regarding that, we can talk about that, inshallah. Now we have a few more questions pouring in, mashallah. How does free will work in Islam? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that all will happen, why do angels record the deeds of individual beings? Great question. If there's free will. Yes. Okay. Free will, right? Number one, how free will works in Islam is that Allah created us. Everything happens with the permission of Allah. Allah gave everything properties, whether it be beneficial or it may be harmful, like a knife. You can use it to cut fruit. You can use it to sacrifice animals, like on the day of, after the day of Arafah or Udhiyah, for Eid that's coming up, inshallah. Or you can use it to harm and use and misuse the knife, right? The decision is yours. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of men and women and the creator of the universe, He gave us the opportunity to do things, and He left it open for us, and He gave us this tendency of differentiating of what is right and wrong, especially after a certain age. we have what's referred to as tamiz. Tamiz in the Arabic language means when you're able to differentiate between what's right and wrong. So the first thing is, if Allah knows what will happen, why will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have angels record the deeds of individual beings? Now, this is a great question. We could talk about free will from a different approach. This person's just asking on the level of angels recording your deeds. Why would the angels need to record deeds? Right? It's a valid question. It's a great question. Number one, everything is a slave to Allah. The sun comes up because Allah orders the sun to come up. It's not, we don't believe in deism. Deism means that Allah just created and then He left and everything is just does its own. That's not what we believe in Islam. Allah actually orders the sun. Allah orders the moon. Allah orders everything, right? To occur the way it occurs. In the same way, the angels are slaves to Allah. If Allah created the angels and said to them, you're going to record the deeds of these people. You're going to be holding up the arsh. You're going to be in sajda. There's specific angels that are in sajda from the beginning, even before Adam alayhi salam's creation. From then all the way till Yawm al-Qiyamah, their only job is to remain in sajda to Allah. That's it. And there's some that bring down rain. And there's some that control this. And there's an angel specifically, and I'm pretty sure all of you know, has the greatest of tasks and the greatest of honor that brings down revelation. Because Allah told him to do so. That's Jibreel alayhi salam. Right? And then there's those angels that Allah says record everything. Why? Number one, the simple answer is because they were ordered and commanded to do so, and they do so flawlessly. The fact that they do so flawlessly, number one, is an incentive that even if we mess up, we ask for tawbah. Because if we believe that Allah tells the truth and He says there's angels that are recording our deeds, then there's going to be a receipt. Right? Because Allah knows what human beings like. We like physical evidence. Allah created us that way. Right? What if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's so just, what if He said, look how amazingly just, you want to talk about justice? Allah is so just, He employed angels with our deeds so there's written evidence on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah give us all Jannah without any hisab. We should all do dua that we never actually have to stand in front of Allah and He has to go through all of our deeds. I don't know about you guys, I don't want to do that in front of Allah and in front of the entire world. Right? But nonetheless, Allah is so just, He didn't have to do that. What He could have done is, you made 700 million whatever mistakes, you asked repentance for this many times, you're going to Jannah, you're going to Jahannam. Allah could have done that because He's Allah. He could do whatever He wants. He is so merciful and He is so generous. Not only did He create a system for us to know that it's being recorded, and when something's recorded, we're better, so it's for our own benefit. And number two, that He's going to bring physical evidence for us by way of our hisab to prove what He's saying is right or wrong. Allahu Akbar. Allah didn't have to do that. When Allah says He's just, that's how just He is. Were you raising your hand or about to raise your hand? Yes, Bismillah. No, I sensed it, mashallah. Faddal. Exactly. Yes, sir. Yes. No, that's a great observation. Jazakallahu khairan. What the brother mentioned actually is very, very important. He also mentioned time, which is yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. No problem. The question is, and we're going to pass the microphone around too, inshallah. Okay. So the question was that there may be this question is occurring more and more often, and there may be some confusion and disconnect because people are confused with Us being bound by time, as time is a creation, and Allah not being bound by time, and they ask questions sometimes, operating or out of the paradigm of bringing Allah to our level, who's not bound by time, and asking questions accordingly, or thinking about Allah accordingly, right? And that's extremely important and a very, very intricate way of looking at Jazakallah khairan, Brother Hisham, is Allah created time. Sometimes people ask the question, if Allah was always there, who was before Allah? Or children, they may say, if Allah was first, then who created Allah? And the Barakallahu feek, Jazakallah khairan. Allah preserve you and your family. That question is actually linked to time. How? When we say before, if Allah was always there, who was before Allah? What that actually is alluding by the questioner is that who was before Allah? And before is referring to time. And Allah created time and is not bound by time. The way Allah created us, and He created the angels, Allah created time. So even to the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran swears by the passage of time, wal asr, right? So when we ask questions, sometimes before even asking a question, you can ask any question, but sometimes to ask a more profound or more in-depth question is considering where your position is and what Allah's position is, and asking a question accordingly. And I think that's a very fruitful, also another fruitful way of asking a question. So Jazakumullah khairan for the questioner. In the English translation of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referred to as He, when Allah says Huwa. Is this an accurate translation? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not greater than man or woman? Of course. It's a great question. When Allah in the Quran says Huwa Allah, right? In the Arabic language, everything is either mudhakkar or mu'annath. Everything is either male or female. And it actually surpasses human beings as far as male and female, right? And just so we can learn, just through example, in something elementary and something that we can learn even as far as Arabic is concerned. In the Arabic language, what are some of the signs that an inanimate object, something that doesn't have any life, is a male or a female? If something is a female, what's one of the telltale signs that something is a female? Ta'nith, or ta for a verb, or a ta marbuta for a noun, right? For instance, watch or clock in the Arabic language is what? Sa'atun, with the ta marbuta at the end, right? That ta marbuta is indicating that it's a hiya, that it's a female. And there's obviously some words, because it's just the way the Arabic language is, there's no rhyme or reason. For instance, a shams. The shams, it has no ta marbuta, but is it male or is it female? A shamsu. Female. Right? Now, this has nothing to do with human beings. Sometimes we have to think about the world that's greater than us, which is the creations that are far more grander than us. They're not better, but they have much more of a presence, like the sun and the moon and the earth, Mother Earth. Ard is also female in the Arabic language, right? So everything for a linguistic purpose, also as a mercy from Allah for us to differentiate between things, masculine and feminine, and even in the Quran, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Himself as Huwa. Now, the creator of all things, the one who uttered His perfect speech, which is the Quran, and if we believe that Allah tells the truth, whether it makes sense to us or not, I'm not saying the questioner is asking this is not saying that it makes sense or not. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, as an act of amr ta'abbudi, as an act of submission to Allah, number one, believe that Allah tells the truth. And we believe His primary source of communication that He chose, which befits His majesty, is His kalam, His speech, which is the Quran, which was given to Jibreel alayhi salam, to Muhammad alayhi salam, which was given to us. If Allah in the Quran refers to himself as Huwa, he refers himself as Huwa, that's it. That's actually how simple it is. Right? But the reason why many individuals or some young people may have an issue with that is whenever they see something that has a gender attached to it, or a he or a she, then they automatically have this problem inside of their heart. Something doesn't sit well because certain philosophies that they may have adopted. And those certain philosophies actually in Islam actually don't even have a base. The only reason Islamically why we learn those philosophies is to help other people. But in reality, those philosophies have no base in Islam. They absolutely do not even compare to a molecular weight, وَلَا مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ, in front of the tradition of Islam. Right? But we learn those sometimes just so we know how to address people. Right? So I hope that answers the question, inshallah. I will, let's take another live question. Do any of the sisters, do they have a microphone there? The sister? If we can, jazakumullah khairan. Okay. Sorry, I feel more popular when I have so many microphones switching. Inshallah, sisters, there's going to be a microphone coming your way. If I can take one from the brothers, inshallah, bismillah. Anybody who has a live question. It can be anything. Again, I don't have the answers to everything, nor most things I don't, but we can work on it together, inshallah. Do any of the brothers first have any questions while we're getting the microphone out to the sisters? All right, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So I was watching a lecture on YouTube, but I wanted to actually ask somebody in person about this. But with all the man-made philosophies that are being pushed in society today, like on the extremism side, we have feminism. On the complete opposite side, we have now like red pill and stuff. But basically, there was an imam who's saying that this is a form of shirk to adopt these philosophies, and that it's not literal shirk like associating with Allah, but it's shirk of ideologies. And I've never heard of this term, and I wanted to know if this was a thing and learn more about it.
Great question, jazakumullah khairan. So, we know in the Sharia that there's a minor shirk and there's a major shirk, which you clarified in your question, mashallah. An example of minor shirk, very, very simple, is delaying something, especially that has a specific time slot to it, let's just say salah, and you delay salah for a non-Sharia excuse, meaning you're not sick, you're not injured, you're not, whatever the case is, you're just doing whatever and you just want to finish up a game, you want to just finish hanging out with some friends, and you miss salah. That, wallahu alam, is considered a shirk al-asghar, asghar meaning a smaller version of shirk, not associating partners with Allah. Rather, Allah was calling you to Him and you delayed it for something that was not important, right? But shirk of ideologies, and that I know what the person is referring to. What that, wallahu alam, what the person is referring to is that there's certain ideas and clusters of ideas, and we're just referred to as ideologies, that have nothing to do with Islam, rather take you away from Islam, and you start embodying those principles, and you look at the Quran and Hadith in that lens, right? And you mentioned red pill, you mentioned feminism being on two extremes, and you know, I would like to sit down and explain all of these. I think generally everybody kind of gets a gist of what these ideologies are, but they do lead to people believing that the Quran is not complete. So can it lead to kufr? Of course it can. Can it lead to shirk? Of course these ideologies can. Do these ideologies, like feminism and red pill, have embedded kufr tendencies in them? Of course they do, right? Like somebody, I'm not saying this about the person that asked this question, but it's a great opportunity to mention that there's even a movement amongst the Muslims, some Muslims in America, a very small portion, wallahu alam, about their Islam, but they, some of them believe that the Quran needs to change, the narrative needs to change from huwa to hiya, because in their sight, Allah is female. So they want to rewrite the Quran instead of huwa Allah, hi Allah, wal-iyadhu billah, right? And obviously this stems from feminist ideas or type ideas, right? And we have to be very, very cognizant of that. And this is one of the reasons why we're here. So jazakallahu khairan for the question. So the question, I think, another way of answering it: can it lead to shirk? Yes, it can lead to shirk. Does it lead to kufr if they continue that path? Of course. Can it lead to them denying verses of the Quran? Yes, which takes you out of the fold of Islam, right? And let me clarify that because related to another question. The fiqhi discourse regarding tariq al-salah, somebody who leaves salah, meaning abandons salah. Jurists of Islam are in difference of opinion. Somebody who intentionally misses a salah, intentionally, when they're fully able to, do they leave the fold of Islam or are they still in the fold of Islam? Because of Allah, obviously in the Quran, ordering us and commanding us about salah. And obviously, man taraka salatan muta'ammidan laqad kafar, hadith of Rasulullah, whoever leads salah intentionally, they've committed kufr or they are kafir. Or the fine line, the hadith, the line between kufr and Islam is the salah, right? There's a wealth of hadith. But how do we look at those hadith? That's why fiqh is necessary, right? Imam Abu Hanifa is of the opinion that as long as the person doesn't believe that salah is not a part of their deen, meaning they're not praying because they say, you know what, I'm Muslim, but I don't believe Allah told us to pray. I don't believe that Muhammad told us to pray 5 times a day. Then that person is out of the fold of Islam. But if they're like, you know what, I'm lazy. You know what, I'm always tired. You know what, I just can't bring myself to do so, but I believe in Allah. And I believe you have to pray. It's fard to pray. That person's still in the fold of Islam. They're committing atrocious sins, but they're still in the fold of Islam. Do you guys understand that differentiation? That this person believes that salah is incumbent upon them, it's fard upon them. But they're just maybe lazy or they just, whatever, all of the above. But you have another person that says, you know what, so Imam Hanifa is of the opinion that that person is still in the fold of Islam as long as they believe it's fard. You know, and the other madahib, some of the other madahib, like Ahmed ibn Hanbal, or one of the opinions of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, one of them is if he leaves it intentionally and he knows full well that the salah is fard and he knows that he could have prayed then they've temporarily left the fold of Islam. Just to let you know how important the salah is. Another opinion from Ahmed ibn Hanbal is that if the person misses the salah intentionally and it becomes a habit, then he's out of the fold of Islam, right? So it's something to take very, very seriously. But to answer your question now, is that there's some people that may just think, you know what, this is not sitting well with me in Islam, but I still believe in Allah, I believe in Rasulullah. Yeah, there's, alhamdulillah, they're still in the fold of Islam. But if they say, oh no, Allah shouldn't have said this, I think that this verse actually doesn't belong in the Quran, then that person left the fold of Islam. Allah protect us in our iman, right? From the sisters, do we have any questions? Okay. Please, please. And we can give him a microphone too if that's okay. Sorry to make you walk around. You have to say.
For the question about who Allah, I think in the Arabic language, huwa could be used as this is in English.
IT also, yes.
Yes, so like we have in the Arabic language, like sometimes inna could be meaning yes. In the Quran, like some people think it's the grammar, there's a mistake because they think inna is just the whatever inna rules, but it's actually in the ayah mean yes. So when people say who Allah, no, let's say he, why not here, male and female? Actually, huwa is like huwa kazalik. Wa huwa kazalik, that means this is
Yes.
the right thing.
Yeah.
So just wanna, am I correct? In
No,
that?
you are correct, yes. And if something also is feminine, it can also be used as it also, right? Because if it's inanimate, if you say aina sa'a hiya ala sarir, for instance, it in the English translation is it is, and that's a great observation. The pronoun as far as huwa and hiya in the Arabic language is also known as it, right? Jazakumullah khairan, Ammuna Hisham. Yes. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Walaikum salam.
Just was curious, you know, how like certain meats are halal and all that, and you know, and the question of zabiya halal and just halal meat. I was just curious, like, you know, I have some friends who would literally go to McDonald's, have a cheeseburger, and say Bismillah, and it's okay. I used to do the same thing some time ago, but then I realized it's not zabiha. in the sense. Can you enlighten like what's the difference between halal meat and zabiya halal meat, if there's a difference?
Yes, mashallah. Jazakallah khair for the question. And there's a few questions that we know in the Sharia that are going to be asked until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And you've asked one of them, Jazakallah khair, and it's a great question. And I'm going to try to summarize this as much as possible, inshallah. The difference of opinion that occurs about meat being halal, dhabiha, are they both the same? Are they both different? Well, in contemporary times, it became two different things, right? In contemporary times, what is called dhabiha, like Rasulullah, whoever eats our dhabiha, dhabihatana, right? It actually came from that word, which back then meant halal. The difference of opinion exists based on a few different narrations from Aisha radiallahu anha, and it's just a very, I don't even know, sorry, where to start, because this question can actually take anywhere from 5 minutes, sometimes it could take an hour. But I'll try to summarize to the best of my ability. Some jurists of Islam took from the face value when Aisha radiallahu anha asked Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the people from the book has given us this food, what should we do with it? Right? It's a good question. Rasulullah sallallahu connotation is, as long as they're from the people of the book, just say Bismillah and eat, right? The difference of opinion exists is, when was this question answered by Rasulullah sallallahu. And when Rasulullah sallallahu in other ahadith talks about iraqat ad-dam, one of the conditions of sacrificing is there has to be iraqat ad-dam, meaning that the blood has to leave the body. And the animal has to be killed with the strike that you give it or the cutting that you do, and it can't be a dead animal, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, حُرِمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُ وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited for you to drink blood, just drinking blood, right? And carcasses, and the flesh of swine, of pigs. The dilemma that occurs today, nowadays, Wallahu alam, I'm just giving you what I know, is even from amongst the slaughterhouses, based on how the animals are killed, there actually isn't a way of tracking, because of mass production, was the animal killed first and then cut? Because if it is, then we're eating dead animals. If we eat, what's considered non-dhabiha, right? And is it better to be safe? Of course it's better to be safe. Because it can be, chickens are a little different, the way that they're killed. But for larger animals, if you go to any slaughterhouse which distributes meat, they don't know if the animal that they got to before they started cutting the animal up, if it was alive or if it was dead. If that's the case, wallahu alam, if that's still the case, I don't know. If that's still the case, then people are saying Bismillah and eating dead animals, which you're not allowed to do, because you can't do that with blood, and you're not allowed to do that with pigs, right? But if that's not the case, and there's a Christian and a Jew, and you go to their farm, or you know that they're a Christian or a Jew, and they cut it, and they mention God's name over it, then if you eat it, then you can eat it. And that's for all across. That's actually considered dhabiha, right? People bring up the argument, oh, Christians aren't what they used to be, Jews aren't what they used to be. Yeah, and Muslims aren't what they used to be either. It's very true, though, right? There's factions and everything. But if you know that somebody's Christian, if they're a Jew, they say in the name of God and they sacrifice, no matter what it is, but they utter that, then it becomes halal for you. You say Bismillah and you can eat it, right? Across the board. But the difference of opinion comes now is there's so much mass production, there's so many different people, there's no real such thing. Are the slaughterhouses really Christians and Jews anymore? Or we don't know that actually, right? Wallahu alam. So is it better to be safe? Of course. But there are other jurists that are much bigger than myself that said that if you go to, the store and you purchase the meat and you say Bismillah and eat it, they said it's halal. I'm not going to cause any type of issue because of that. They probably know a lot more than I do, and they probably know more about the culture of meat than I do. I'm just telling you the basics of what the general principles are. But is it better to be safe? Is it better? No one can disagree. Is it better for Muslims to eat animals that's sacrificed by a Muslim? They say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and they sacrifice the animal. Of course, no one's going to disagree with that. And these shops are everyone. No one has an excuse now to say, oh, It's scarce. When Muslims first came to America, it was scarce to find a Muslim slaughterhouse. That's no longer an excuse anymore, especially in the areas that we live. In other places, yes, of course. You know, Wallahu a'lam. We have another question that just came in here. Yeah, Bismillah, please actually go ahead, because this one's kind of repetitive.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I have a very specific question pertains to a specific scenario. So I have a non-Muslim friend. Specifically, he's Christian, and he's open to learning about Islam. He says, right, but he also wants me to be open to learn about obviously Christianity, right? So he's in it for the whatever. We're on the same idea that we're looking for the truth, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. For somebody in my stance, right? Obviously, I don't have a tremendous amount of Islamic educational background to support everything I say. What would be like the best approach regarding speaking with a non-Muslim, specifically someone that's Christian, and kind of getting him to see that, okay, Islam is the correct religion? What is like the those starting conversations we should have?
Jazakumullahu khairan. Great question. One thing before I answer the question is to realize how everything in this world, but especially Islam, is very experiential, is based on experiences. You can give somebody all of the da'wah in the world, but if you have a bad reputation and you're very rude and you're very treacherous with people, they're not going to follow what you have to say, right? Rather, if they see the way Islam conducts you. Another thing I'll say before I mention this is just to give you an example. Why do some people, whether it's in the YouTube verse or anybody else on social media, what's the number one thing, whether they're right or wrong, that gives them a huge following? How do they get a huge following? I'll take out the easy one: if they're very provocative, right? If there's a lot of shock value. But what else? There's a beautiful word called confidence, right? Confidence is also very experiential. And the person who's talking about their Islam, they should be confident because we believe there's no difference of opinion. To us, especially, it is a matter of fact. It's an objective truth. It's not an opinion. Islam is the truth, and there's no room for disagreement with that. And we're fully confident in saying that. The reason why I'm saying that is, number one, that composure is very, very important for anybody who's just a Muslim. One of the main reasons why we're here is to build people's confidence. Hey, Islam has the answer to everything, but also carry yourself as a Muslim. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about myself first and all of us. Someone also now, if they make a condition, this happens actually a lot, where somebody says, hey, you know what? And I know somebody who was giving da'wah to a person who's Hindu, and the person was a Hindu. He said, you know what? You study a little bit of my religion. I'll study a bit about yours, and then we'll come together and talk. And I said to that person, number one, as Islam, you're up here. Shirk is down here. Your level of Islamic confidence doesn't even consider studying shirk, meaning you're too good for that as a Muslim. To some people, it may sound arrogant. Oh, well, too bad, right? And again, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying this is how we conduct our Islam. We don't make conditions with people, especially somebody who commits shirk, that say, you know what, I'll study your religion to see who has the truth. I know I have the truth. I'm going to be a great friend of yours. I'm a loyal person because Islam taught me that. I'll be the best of friends. You have never to worry about me talking about you behind your back. But this is Islam. And if I'm not able to facilitate something for you by myself, I'll facilitate it elsewhere. But I am not in any need to study the truth. I know the truth. This is Islam. And come as you are, and I'm going to accept you. So Bismillah. So the first condition is just to show a level of confidence. And I know you're being a good friend, but try to keep it at the level of, you know what? I'm not here to study any other religion because I know Islam is the objective truth. I can have study sessions with you if you like, and we could do compare and contrast, and we could talk about how the Quran is the final testament. You have the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Quran is the final testament. We can definitely do that because that's my paradigm of the previous books. I believe in the previous books. Isa alayhi salam, Jesus is mentioned by name in the Quran more than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Just by specifically name, meaning Muhammad and Isa ibn Maryam, right? By their specific names. And we believe in Jesus, and we believe the truest Christians are the Muslims, if the person's a Christian. Or we believe that the truest Jews are the Muslims, for instance, right? Because Isa alayhi salam, and I'll say this, and I know you grab the mic, there's two things. The goal of Isa alayhi salam was two things, and even per the Bible. Number one was to guide the lost children of Israel, meaning that he was specifically for the children of Israel, for Bani Israel. Being Christian actually meant that Isa alayhi salam, he told the Christians, don't take my message to the Gentiles, meaning keep my message in Bani Israel. If you're propagating your religion outside of Bani Israel, you're doing something anti-Christian. So the first reason why he came was to guide the people of the children of Israel, which is only for the children of Israel, no other people. The second part is to foretell and to forewarn that there's a final messenger coming. That's the second goal of Isa alayhi salam, and the second point of his prophethood. Everything that he went through was summarized in these two things. Number one, guiding the children of Israel, and number two, telling them that there's a final messenger by the name of Ahmed that's going to be the final messenger, which is why there were Christian priests around the time Muhammad ﷺ was born. They were looking for, where is this Muhammad ﷺ? Where is he? That's why Waraq ibn Nawfal knew about his coming, right? But Bismillah, go ahead.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Amr. No, I completely agree with what you're saying, right? But I'm just trying to think, and I agree with what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I'm trying to think from like another person, someone obviously, of course, you know, our job is just to relay the message. We can't necessarily, you know, we hope for everyone today. You know, that's out of our control. Allah is the one that gives the hidayah. But going with that mentality or that concept, right? Okay, like we have to go in with this is the absolute truth, which it is, right? And but going from like another person to someone that's not Muslim, right? They also believe, right, that what they're studying or what they have is the truth, right? So we believe what we have the truth. They believe what they have the truth. So if we have going that mentality with everyone, technically, isn't it? We're not really displaying Islam. We're just showing that we have that confidence that this is the truth. But they also display that same level of confidence that this is the truth. So isn't there another way to, I guess, attract or to invite, be like, hey, maybe you should consider this in comparison to that?
Yes. And the reason why I mentioned the confidence thing is that confidence is very, very contagious, and it has a profound effect. But yes, that's their mindset too, right? More power to them. But the beautiful thing about this is there's a reason why Islam is the fastest. Those people, some of those people, they were amongst those people that may have been completely devout Christians, even on the priest level, like Yusuf Estes and the likes, right? Who were teaching people that Christianity is the objective truth. But Islam is still the fastest growing religion, regardless of. So our job is, again, your observation is beautiful, but our observation is, our way of conducting this is, I need to save this person. And if this person realizes what saving means in Islam, and then follows through of them just thinking about things rationally. Look, and I'll give you a small example, right? They may feel that they have the truth. We know what the truth is, but it doesn't mean that and we're going to keep it. We got to give it to them. And how we give it to them is we just talk rationally with them. We talk rationally to them. Let's just say somebody believes in the Trinity. A small example. There's many examples, right? We want to talk to them, okay, rationally, does it make sense to you, my dear brother, that God is in three parts, but he's actually one? That's the first part. But when you describe to them historically where the Trinity started, which didn't start with Isa alayhi salam, it didn't start with his disciples, it's people who claim to be his disciples, Luke, Paul, John, all these people who never saw Isa alayhi salam, who never sat with him, who never ate with him, who never did anything, who ended up making up the Trinity in a treaty called the Treaty of Nicaea, right? But it has nothing to do with Isa alayhi salam. And historically, it's trackable historically because Christians actually know this historically, right? So the reason I'm mentioning this is they believe in something, but our job is to unpack this for them. is to say, look, you believe in this. It's good that you believe in this because it means you're principle based. But let's just talk about these things that are the core of your belief in your aqidah. Because if you talk about the core of my belief in aqidah, laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah, there's nothing like him. Absolutely nothing. And the reason why he's only one, because if you have two of something, God has to be unique. And if there's two of something, the uniqueness goes away. Right? So he only has to be one. If he's three, then there's no uniqueness. Even though you claim that they're different parts and you use analogies of the sun gives off heat, it gives off light, and it gives off all of that. That's fine. You can concoct a whole bunch of cool ideas on the surface value, on face value. But in reality, no matter what happens, like you said, hidayah is from Allah. And the confidence that we have in Islam of our objective truth, coupled with us just talking rationally and maybe some historical proofs, their belief in Allah, don't be surprised, in their relationship with Allah becomes even stronger than those people who were born Muslims. Because they believed in something wholeheartedly differently, and then when they have this aha moment, coupled with the barakah and the hidayah of Allah, those people actually end up becoming leaders of Muslim communities, right? But I get it. Look, there's some things in life where it just is what it is. I hate to say it like that, but some people believe objectively that their way is the truth, and we believe also. But it doesn't mean that we change our approach because they believe that, because the truth will prevail regardless, right? The truth will prevail. And Jazakallah khairan, because I think that there should actually be a complete study on that question that you just asked, because there's so many other issues that branch off from that. There's philosophical issues, there's psychological issues, there's cultural issues depending on where you come from, right? So it's a profound question. Jazakallah khairan. There's one more question from there. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
This is kind of a general question. You want to get your advice on this. So I'm going to start this off with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the best of manners. I've heard of even famous people converting to Islam just based on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's manners.
Yes, sir.
And a story that you see this time and time again through the Sirat and even the Hadith. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would talk to someone and he would like completely turn around, face them face to face, and give them 100% undivided attention. And nowadays, in the cell phone age that we live in, it's hard to get people's attention no more. I've had issues where we go to dawats and eat parties or whatnot, and we're sitting around and we're gonna be discussing, let's see, a book or something we saw on YouTube, and half the people are just looking at their phones and not even paying attention anymore. Right? I'll be honest with you, I've gotten to the point now where there's certain even people that I know who are addicted to their phone, where if we go like a long distance drive, go to St. Louis, they will sit there on their phone and gossip loudly the entire time. And I've just refused now. I'm not going to travel with you no more. How can we address this? Because to me personally, I think it's bad manners. When you're having a discussion, you're talking about something, you're seeking input, you want people engaged, but yet people are just addicted to their cell phone and they can't even pay attention no more, what you're saying. Or what they do is they'll zone out and then all of a sudden they'll interrupt. How would you go about it? Especially now when it's elderly people. When the people are younger, it's easy for me to kind of make a smart aleck comment and, but what about older people keeping your adab, right? I mean, these are older. How do we address this?
Man, mashallah, that's maybe you're going to get me in trouble, but I'll answer regardless. No, it's such a simple question, and this is another cultural norm that's built, right? That overrides adab. Look, if Rasulullah said, "I was sent to complete makarim al-akhlaq," to complete akhlaq and adab, just to talk about adab, if you don't mind. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but adab is such a profound thing. How many of us, every single one of us has witnessed a child that does something so beautifully that you see the adab of the child and you say, you don't even attribute it to him only. You attribute it to his parents and his grandparents. That's how far adab goes. It surpasses your generation. That's such a beautiful thing about adab. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the point is so beautiful, brother, that when Muhammad ﷺ used to turn and talk and give that undivided attention, even to the point where the Sahaba said, when Muhammad ﷺ, even though he was talking in a gathering, and he would turn to us, we would forget about the whole world, the way he would talk to us, and it would just seem like he's only addressing us even though he's talking to the world. That's what Rasulullah adab was like. But now there's a cultural norm. Imagine a wave that comes over and just pulls in what was once adab, and now it's totally understandable. Now, if we're sitting in a gathering, someone's like, uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh. Or now, that used to be in the beginning, now it's just like, yeah, I know, on the phone, All right, dude, so what are we eating for lunch? You know, like, it's one of those things, right? And it's a norm now. It's totally understandable. And I'll tell you what, maybe 7 years ago, what shifted my paradigm. And again, it's experiential. It's different for everybody. Sometimes people just need to be told, hey, dude, this is disrespectful. Depending on how well you know the person. Dude, you're being disrespectful. I'm talking to you right now. You're on your phone the whole time, right? If it's people who are really still working, they're at a certain age, you can say things indirectly. Hey, you know what, guys? Can you just put your phones away for 1 second because what I'm saying is kind of important? And just out of respect for me as a human, because I'm respecting you as a human, if you just put your cell phones down for a second. So there was a brother. I was praying in this small musalla, and I was leading the prayer there, and somebody's phone goes off in the masjid, right? One of the brothers, he stands up and he says, you know what, you guys shouldn't have your phones with you or whatever, and he walks away. Cool? He's kind of a loud, vocal brother. One of the times I was praying in front of him, and there was another person leading. This was probably like 2 days later. My phone goes off. I turn it off. Forget to put it on silent. And the brother's praying behind me. He's a family friend, but he's very vocal, and he means good. He can be pretty harsh sometimes, right? So after Salah, he walks outside. We're walking outside, and he says, why don't you just leave your phone at home? I said, yeah, I kind of need my phone right now. And he's like, this Salat al-Maghrib is only 7 minutes. You need your phone for 7 minutes? And he says, you know what? Even if you keep it in your phone and you keep it on silent, and if you keep the vibration off, our minds are so intricate, this is what he says to me, that even if it's not buzzing, you'll touch it during your Salah to see if it's buzzing or not. And he says, we've instantly ruined our khushu' because of this little device that's in our pocket, right? And the way he said that, he said, you know what? My wife is sick right now. This is what he says to me. I leave my phone in my car. He says, you live right here. Just leave it at home. There's something, the timing that he said it, when I went back, I reflected. I was like, yeah, how foolish is that? Like, I'm willing to destroy my khushu' of Salat al-Maghrib. Like Rasulullah, he said, as-salatu ala waqtiha khayrun min ad-dunya wa ma fiha. The salah on its time, on its appointed time, is better than, he's talking about only one salah, is better than everything in this world and what it contains, right? And I was thinking about that, and I said, I'm ruining my salah just for that. And he's right, Salat al-Maghrib is sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 7 minutes. Do I really have to have my cell phone with me? And then this detachment that occurred with me, now then whenever I was going to dawat, I would just leave my phone in the car. When I was going to the masjid, leave my phone in the car, and just became a regular thing. And it all started from that one person, who I would never meet. He's not a scholar. He is just a regular at a small musalla, and he has a certain way of talking. And because I know that he didn't mean harm, he just spoke to me very, very directly. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, this guy's embarrassing me type thing. But when I was walking home, I was like, dude, this guy's 100% right. I woke up the next morning. I felt a little better. And then I was like, he changed my habit like that. From Allah, obviously. Allah sent that person. So the first point is why I mentioned that whole story. Number one, we always talk about generally, my life is difficult. Allah gave me all these obstacles. Yeah, but Allah gave us many outs too. And many times Allah gives us ilham. He gives us inspiration through people. And sometimes there's a person that comes along that stops you from doing haram. Sometimes there's a person that makes you do something. And sometimes there's a person that just talks sense into you, and that person is sent from Allah, whether you like it or not. Allah favored you with that person even though he may have been harsh, right? So number one, if we have brothers and sisters that are correcting or helping each other because they want to talk to you, they don't want to take your cell phone away from you. They just want to show you love and they just want to feel love from you. That's all it is. Because that's what a human being is. A human being can't survive without being social, right? And I know you didn't ask about this. And just last thing I'll add to this, because this is a really, really important topic, is there's two classifications and names for the human being in the Quran. One is nas and one is insan. Nas originally comes from nas, like the poet said, or a proverb in the Arabic language, awwalu nasin, awwalu nasin. The first human was the first one to forget. So nas originally comes from like forgetfulness, nisyan. Insan comes from unusa, somebody who is a very social being and they can't survive without being social. If you take a social element away from human beings, you're causing destruction of the human race, especially if it becomes widespread, right? So if I was to like ever ask any of you who ever had to live alone temporarily or for a long period of time, right? There was one period in my life, and I don't want to make it about myself, I'm just throwing myself under the bus and just using myself as an example. I had to live alone once when I was living in Egypt for 3 months, and I'm telling you, I hated it. I knew it became a problem when I figured out I was talking to myself. And it was a real problem. Because I'm a social person. I love being around people. I love hearing laughter, joking, talking, food, eating. But there was a time where I was living alone for 3 months. Some people can do it. I personally hated it, right? And once I started living with other roommates, I found roommates again and stuff. Alhamdulillah, my life became more stable, you know? And we see that in history. Movies made about that, like that movie Castaway, you know, like with Tom Hanks and him being launched off to an island and living alone, and he has his ball, he names it Wilson because it's a Wilson ball. That's a human actually coping with not having humans around them. But what if you have humans around you, coming to your point, but they're not present? That's where you know that you're actually leading to a very disastrous lifestyle. Where human beings, we have so much at the tip of our fingers on this phone. We're literally cyborgs right now, where we have access to everything. And now AI and ChatGPT, like, it's at a different level, but the humanness is going away, the human connection is going away, but knowledge and information is going up. It's a disaster, right? And dare I say, it's inevitable. It's actually almost nothing we can do about it in the immediate. Can we do something in the future? Of course. In the immediate, we just have to have sabr and keep raising awareness like you're doing, right? And I think the fact that you're asking this question is raising awareness. Brothers and sisters, let's start off on the level of Allah's rights over us. What this beautiful brother asked this beautiful and gave a beautiful comment regarding using our phones. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam reprimanded the Sahaba who were playing with pebbles during the Jum'ah khutbah. He saw some of the Sahaba playing with pebbles in the masjid during the khutbah, and he said, stop playing with pebbles during the khutbah because your salah will not be accepted. That's playing with pebbles. Maybe someone's just thinking and they're doing this while the khatib is talking. He said, don't even do that. So what do you think about cell phones? Brothers, I'm telling you, whenever I'm attending any Jummah anywhere, it's so disheartening. Look, I'm not saying I'm a better person. I'm telling you, I'm probably the worst human being in this masjid right now, in this extended community. But I'm telling you right now, what breaks my heart is when you're going to a masjid, and brothers, they come to the masjid. I don't know on the sister side. I don't go and pray on the sister side. But the brothers, I see so many of them. Before they sit down, they take their cell phone out, they put it down, they sit down, they get comfortable, and they start using their phone during the khutbah. WhatsApp, this, that. I wasn't spying on them, but I can see kind of from a distance what's on their screen. Sometimes YouTube videos, sometimes this, sometimes that. And I asked myself, I said, subhanallah, what if this individual this is the only Islam they're getting their entire week, right? But forget about that person. What about the rights of Allah? If Rasulullah is reprimanding the Sahaba, who are the best of generations, not to play with pebbles during the khutbah, what about just general talk and WhatsApp chats and the entire duration of the khutbah, right? Like that conversation with the rights of human beings that you're talking about. But what are we going to expect of people who do this with the rights of Allah? What rights are they going to show people? And I don't like to make it like, oh, I'm reprimanding people. Dude, I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about everybody else. As a community, we should be able to talk about these things that can make us uncomfortable. Dude, we have to talk as a community. we should be able to make each other uncomfortable because we do it for the sake of Allah. If you see something wrong with me, I would expect that you pull me to the side, take that title of sheikh away, because if you know who real shuyukh are, you wouldn't call me a sheikh, right? And the previous generations of who are real shuyukh, you should be able to pull me to the side and be like, look, hey, this is, you shouldn't be doing it like this. And you know what? I'm going to respect you for it. And even if I show discomfort to you as your brother, next time you see me do something wrong, don't pull back. You still have to correct me. That's a relationship we should have as brothers and sisters in Islam, right? Like, oh, that person feels uncomfortable, I'm not going to correct him. No, I'm telling you right now, everybody, especially for me, you have an open license. If you see me do something un-Islamic or haram or something that may not even sit well with you socially, let's say, pull me to the side and talk to me. And if I show disdain on my face, the next time I do something else, guess what? I'm going to ask you, you still have to do it again. That's the relationship, inshallah, we should have as brothers and sisters. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for bringing that up, man. I know I went off on a tangent, but it's something that's been on my mind for a long time. Barakallahu feek. Yes.
Someone wanted me to ask you, he said that he asked me to ask you, when you send the salawat to the Prophet ﷺ, is the ummah included on that salawat? So something that he wants to clarify.
Is the ummah?
The ummah, like us. That's what he was referring
Very
to.
good. So you can actually make dua for rest of the ummah, of course, but when you say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, right? Wa ali Muhammad, like the people who are related to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you make a dua, like we hear the khatibs say, you know, وَالنَّاسُ أَجْمَعِينَ, right? That's still making dua for the people. The reason why people do that is when you use Rasulullah sallallahu in the beginning of your dua, and you say, oh Allah, also forgive rest of the ummah and stuff. But if somebody just says, like, everyone should be doing their daily salawat on Rasulullah sallallahu, at least the minimum is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, right? Whatever flavor that you choose of sending salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That salawat is going to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we say wa ala ali Muhammad is going to those people who are actually related to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Those people who are related to him. But if you just leave the salawat just for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it's obviously just going to him, right? And that's a blessing. And just to remind you of the days that are coming, obviously, of Dhul Hijjah, and the best of adhkar, and how the Sahaba used to conduct themselves with the adhkar. One of the Sahaba asked Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, what if I leave 1/4 of my dhikr that I do all day of sending salawat upon you? Muhammad said, that's good, and if you did more, that'd be better. He said, okay, what if I did half? Of all of the adhkar I do all day, I send upon you just half. He said, that's good, and if you did more, that's better. He said, what if I did 2/3? Rasulullah, he said, if you did, that's good. If you did more, that's better. He said, what if all of the adhkar I send are upon you, Ya Rasulullah? He said, if you did, that's still the best thing you can do. So we should remember, don't underestimate the salawat upon Muhammad is a very, very powerful tool for the believer, right? Because it's one of the few verses, and all of you know this, because we're all Muslims and we hear this all the time. We hear the khatib always say, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Right? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Just think about that verse, and then we can move on, inshallah. There's very few times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and dare I say the only time in the Quran, where Allah says He does something, and the malaika do something, and then He commands the believers to do so. Look at the justice and mercy of Allah. Usually we hear, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idha qumtum ila salati, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Oh believers, Allah is commanding you right away to do something. Whenever we hear, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, Allah is commanding us. But in this verse, it's very different. It surpasses the cosmos. Allah says, Allah, indeed Allah, and the angels send salawat upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Then He says, oh believers, send salutations upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What if you can do what Allah and the angels do? You know what that is? Sending salawat upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a profound thing. It's a very, very profound thing, right? So I think to answer your question, yes, you can start off with, the salawat, whatever. There's many ways to send salawat upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can literally do what you do after the tashahhud. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala that. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad. You could do the extended version. You could do a shorter version, but if you include that in the dua of afterwards, that dua has more of an effect, right? The formula to have a beautiful dua is praising Allah, followed by salawat on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then asking Allah for what you want, right? Anything else? I think we're just about getting. I think we can. Yes, let me just look online real quick because this. Yeah. All right. The beautiful thing about anonymous questions, you don't know which ones are troll questions and which ones are not. It's beautiful, though. It's part of our beautiful experience. I think that may be just about it. The Quran prohibits consumption of anything that is harmful, such as alcohol. Why is the smoking of shisha cigarettes not prohibited, as it is also harmful? Very good question. So I want you to think about, yes, alcohol is haram in its essence, because Allah said so. One of the reasons why it is haram is because of its harm. It doesn't have to be the only reason, right? But contemporary scholars, if you may say, have differed upon cigarettes and shisha, for instance, if it's considered haram or if it's considered makruh, right? The general populace of the Muslim world, the Darul Iftas, for instance, Darul Ifta of Egypt, the Darul Ifta of, and Darul Ifta means that the mufti of the country and those people who are in the cabinet of the mufti go through a rigorous process of contemporary issues, and they have a specific, obviously, department just for that. In the Ifta of Saudi Arabia and northern African countries, and they're generally, the general populace of the Muslim world is that cigarettes are haram, right? Someone can say, and I'll talk about the makruh portion, someone can say, oh, well, eating a cheeseburger is harmful too, so it's haram for you, right? Eating too much salt is harmful, so it's haram. Let's just say that is the case, right? Because if you do have a healthy diet and you do just eat a hamburger patty, for instance, a hamburger would probably be actually good for your health because of just you eating meat and not eating any sugars. If you were to ask me what's more harmful, eating a hamburger or sugars, I would say sugars, obviously, and processed or simple carbohydrates, right? But I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just saying. But that being said, let's just say somebody uses that excuse, oh, eating candy is haram, so it can be harmful. Yes, if you have diabetes and the doctor tells you you should not be eating any sugar, and the doctor tells you, because the doctor now becomes the mufti, even for your deen and your health, then you shouldn't be eating that and it can be haram. Of course it can, right? But it's what we refer to in the Sharia is a qiyas ma'al fariq, where you're trying to make a false analogy between salt, for instance, or overconsumption of salt or hamburgers and cigarettes. Why? Because the hamburger and salt are still from the classification of food and drink, which is a part of human survival. Food and drink, right? Cigarettes are something that's not a part of the natural habitat of the human being. It's not a part of the natural consumption. So when that happens, when you include something that's not from human consumption, then you have to balance out, is this actually good for you or is it bad for you, right? Then you would dictate whether it's haram or halal, which is why the Darul Ifta of Egypt and all the majority of the Muslim countries believe that it is haram. The Indian subcontinent is a little different. The Hanafis of India believe that it's makruh and makruh tahrimi, which means that it's makruh in layman terms, almost haram but not haram yet. So obviously it's better to follow the majority understanding of this issue. It has to do with social and health issues. Shisha kind of follows the same track. People can claim that shisha is not harmful as cigarettes, but just follow the principle. Is shisha actually a part of the natural consumption of human beings. If it's not, then when you use it, is it actually helpful or is it harmful? And someone can say, oh, it just gives me a peace of mind. It helps me relax better. It makes me more relaxed. That's fine. Exercise helps you relax too, right? Just not in the beginning, but it's actually good for you, right? So Allah protect us in our health. Jazakumullah khairan. We have one more live question, I think, and we're good to go. Adhan is at 10:15, right? Yeah, one more question. Bismillah.
Yeah, you brought the topic about Dhul Hijjah. That was about. I had a question. Like the last 10 nights of Ramadan, right? It's very significant. Allah says that like last 10 nights, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah is very significant. But including me, right? We don't give that much of importance. We know the significance, but can we just give a reminder of what are the virtues and what can we do, like fasting?
Yes.
Why we don't give that much of importance, like last 10 nights to this first 10 days?
Yes. So do you remember how I kept on repeating that, us as human beings, we're very experiential. The Ramadan experience is so different that everybody's already in it. And there's so many reminders of Taraweeh and so many things happening. Iftar regularly, so everybody just naturally falls in. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears an oath actually by the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, right? In Surah Al-Fajr, wal-Fajr wal-Layalin Ashr. And he's referring to the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So the best days of the year, brothers and sisters, the days are the days of Dhul Hijjah. The best nights are the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Allah, again, is so merciful that He even gave us more of an opportunity in separating the nights which are greatest for you and the days which are greatest for you. So Allah gave us Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, we made Ramadan. And then He gave us the 6 days of Shawwal. The favors keep coming, keeps on giving us, right? And then the days of Dhul Hijjah come, right? And in these days of Dhul Hijjah, even the Sahaba, Abdullah bin Abbas, there's narrations where they used to go out just even in the marketplace to remind people and do التسبيح والتحليل and tahmid, saying La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah in public. This was their practice to remind people of the days of Dhul Hijjah. Now, is fasting a great ibadah to do during Dhul Hijjah, especially the day of Arafah? Yes. But also, if you want to fast the 10 days, of course. Whether you're sacrificing or not sacrificing. Some people think or feel that I'm not sacrificing, I'm not a part of it. No, you're still a part of Dhul Hijjah. If you're a believer and you're still alive and you're a part of these days of Dhul Hijjah, just doing any act of worship and knowing is Dhul Hijjah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies, right? But the brother actually asked and is actually asking, and it's almost a plea, please increase the culture of the 10 days of Ramadan that are very, very sanctified in the eyes of Allah. And building a culture like masjids, they do it. And I think ICW is also doing this, right? With the iftar on the day of Arafah and the Quran recitation. But make a goal of fasting. And if you know somebody is fasting, try to bring back those feelings of Ramadan to you and serve those people who are fasting in the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, whatever, the 9 days of Dhul Hijjah, right? So a lot of it has to do with what we make of it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who celebrate the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah the same way and the feelings we had with the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Allahumma accept, Allahumma taqabbal, O Allah accept. Jazakumullahu khairan wa akhina da'wan, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Ahmed Said, for answering all the questions. I just passed out the flyer for surveys. Please take your time to, just few seconds, we'll send us your feedback. And as always, continue to send your questions. We're going to have this program every Saturday after Maghrib. And Jazakumullah khair for coming.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.